Hi friends, it's Deanna Williston from Our Blooming Catholic Life, and I'm here today with one of our easy knit projects that you can do. You could do this crochet too, no problem. Just something easy that you could do really for anyone, but it's particularly good for the homeless, the homebound, or those in nursing homes. And you can see I have it rolled up kind of in a neat little ball and tied with a tie. The tie is one of the really great features of this. And I had a lot of people question me on this when I was finishing it. You'll see why in a second. Can you see these great textures, friends? So what I did was I had this super scrumptious yarn, and it's just so scrumptious. I did garter stitch, which is just knit, 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 knit. And I alternated it with, you knit in the knits, knit in the purls and purl in the knits. It's called moss stitch. It's another just great, fun texture. And the texture is part of what I'm going to like about this for people in nursing homes. They use different textures a lot just to get their senses going. Sometimes people get that itchiness going on where they just need to scratch. And if they have things of different textures, that tactile sense, you can imagine if you were in the same room all the time with all the same things, you need some stimulation occasionally. And so having something, this can simply, it's a decent size shawl. You can see, I'll show you in a second. It could easily be laid over a person's lap, but you could use almost any different sorts of textures for that. It's also nice because these make a fairly close knit, so they're not sticking their fingers in loops and getting all tangled. But if you set something with a bunch of different textures on people's laps, it's going to be a sensory thing. But you can also, if you're cold, easily drop this, especially if you're dropping it over somebody's back, drop it over them. And a lot of times we use really fancy shawl pins and buttons and things to hold things together. They're really difficult for some people. I know when I worked in the public schools, we actually weren't allowed to use shawl pins or hair pins of any kind because they could be used as weapons. I know that's really sad. It was in the public schools. What can I tell you? And so if you can't wear a shawl pin, having a tie on the end is really great. And so sometimes if you want it to be more of a Danish tie shawl, you'd bring it up higher on you and you could pull it around, and I have enough room to tie it in the back. Why that's super great is if I'm out running around doing chores, or you're tying it on somebody who likes to untie things, you can actually tie it in the back, and it kind of goes under here so they can't really see it. They may try and fidget and get behind them to get at it, but they may not. They may just leave it on. And it is a great, look at how cute it is. And it's a super warm layer because I made that great texture. It is so comfy. It is a great for a back of the couch thing. So it's super comfy. And if you're noticing, what's this neat little edging? The pattern I used, friends, is the famous knit dishcloth pattern. I have a couple short videos using that pattern earlier in the year. Was it in December? I think right before Christmas, I showed that. Do I have some of those? I have it. Just a second here. Let me pop over here. I kept some of those dishcloths back as dishcloths or washcloths. I kept them back for gifts. And you can see they're actually worked corner to corner. You start out with like 4 stitches. You cast on about 4 stitches, and you're going to knit 2, yarn over, and knit the last 2. And then you're going to turn and repeat the same thing over and over. That's how you make it. So you're increasing only 1 stitch every other on one end, right? Every time. And when you get to the point where, remember, if you wanted to make a blanket and you wanted to do it even, there's a slightly different pattern. And then there's a way to decrease it. But I didn't decrease. I worked from the very bottom. Remember, you can tie this in the front or the back. That's what it looks like if you tie it in the back. Let me see if I can get it if I tie it down here loosely in the front. That was so nice and snug and warm. But if I tie it in the front, it's just like this at the bottom. Sorry. I can maybe jump up. There you go. But you can see it's a really nice size shawl. And how did I do it? I know it's a discontinued yarn, and so I'm going to apologize for that. But I had it in my stash, and I was like, what can I do with it? You can find something similar. This was the James C. Brett. It's a company out of England. Northern Lights. It was one ball, one shawl. And they had a pattern. I wasn't super crazy about their pattern that they had. It's considered to be double knitting size. It was 450 meters or 492 yards. It is 150 grams. It was 95% premium acrylic and 5% viscose. It knitted up, they said 4 millimeters or US size 6. What was the gauge? Oh my gosh, friends, the gauge is so hard to read for me right now. They're saying, whatever. It doesn't really matter what the gauge is because I think I even knit it on an 8. I think this is an 8. An 8 is one of my favorite sizes to use. And yeah, it got really bunched up on this cable, as you can imagine. So I really wasn't sure how big it was going to make, but since it was one ball, one shawl, I thought, hey, it may work for other shawl patterns. And it really did. Again, that was 150 grams, 450 meters, or 492 yards. You can probably look up your substitutions. If you type this into Ravelry or some other places will actually tell you. James C. Brett actually may have something on their website that is a great substitute for this. Or I know when I typed it in, there were a lot of places that still have it in stock and that you could get it from. So super exciting because it was a super easy pattern. It's something that you can do. You don't have to count or, any of that nonsense. How did I do the ties? So when I got to the very last row, as I'm working the next to last row, coming across the top, I just went ahead and cast on 60 more stitches on this side, and I cast them off on my way back. So as soon as I cast on 60, I just did a simple knit cast off all the way back, cast off the whole way back, the whole way down here. And then when I got to this side, I actually left one stitch on, and you could leave 2. I could argue leaving 2. And I cast on, I think, 75. I wanted one of the ties to be longer. So I cast on 75, and I did a knitted cast off the whole way back. You can see it's a nice chunky monkey little cord. It's not something skinny. And I just cast off all the way back until I got here. I left a really long tail because I wanted this to have a really strong connection. That's why I didn't make them separately as an I-cord and sew them on. I wanted that to be really strong. So I left a really long end for a lot of sewing at that end. I'm super, super duper happy with it. Again, it's just so great for as a work shawl. Sometimes you don't want to wear a heavy sweatshirt or whatever when you're doing chores in the house. You want the warmth, but you don't necessarily want the long sleeves that are awkward to pull up or whatever. You're getting in garbage, you can just pull these sleeves up. I usually wear 3/4 sleeves. So this is just great. It gives you that extra layer of warmth on your core, and it stays on really well because it's tied in the back. Anyway, this is a super easy project, and it makes for a great charity project because I'm sorry, I think it's gorgeous, and yet it was so simple to make. And again, okay, it took me a couple weeks, but it's a no-brainer project for when you're talking with other people or watching TV or sitting in a waiting room. It's really, and you could do almost any pattern you wanted. Again, I just did garter stitch with some moss stitch, but you could choose whatever you want. And I just did the edges of the dishcloth pattern. Just increasing on one end every row. It was so much fun, friends. I hope you enjoy this. I hope you give it a try. It's always just great to get some creative projects. Oh, if you're knitting for like a nursing home or assisted living, anything like that, or even a homeless shelter, check with them on yarn content. This can get a little tricky and there's no overall thing. A lot of times nursing homes and places like that, places that do your laundry for you, prefer you to have acrylic because they just want to be able to throw everything in the washing machine, right? All synthetic that can be washed. Now, if you're knitting for, say, a reservation, a Native American reservation, a lot of times they want pure wool because it lasts longer, it is fire resistant, it stays warm even when wet, and they're not going to be doing the laundry as much, and they're okay with, they know how to deal with wool things. Again, this is not a set in stone rule. This is why you need to ask. Homeless shelters, it's like 50-50. Some of them love having acrylic things that they can just throw in the washer, but some know that people aren't coming in that often for washing or are around those makeshift fires, and those can get dangerous. So some of them want wool because of the makeshift fires and the not really doing laundry. If they're hanging everything up on a line, yeah, it's not going to matter as much that it's wool. You know, you're not worried about shrinking the wool in the dryer if you're not using a dryer, right? Dryers are so expensive this day in the laundromat. It's insane. Just saying. So just check if you're going to donate, check before you start what kind of material they want, and ask about the tie-shawl. I think they're a great project. So easy that you can just come over somebody and slip it around them. Sometimes putting something over people's heads kind of freaks them out, and a lot of fiddly buttons and things can freak them out. Now, if they need buttons to play with, as another texture, you could totally add some fun decorative buttons on there. Again, ask if they need a sensory thing. That could be really good. They could sit there and instead of scratching at their arms, they could get some energy out, checking out the different textures, and maybe have some pretty buttons on there. Again, you want to check for safety and washability, what is best for the charity you're donating to. Oh, friends, thank you for joining me today. May God bless you and keep you. May he make his light to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may the good Lord bless you. In the name of the Father, the Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Don't forget, I'll put that pattern down below in the comments and the name of the yarn. In the description. God bless you, friends. Bye.